number one cause of death for people living with diabetes is heart disease.
The amount of deaths from autoimmune disease in general is actually higher than heart disease, cancer, diabetes.
But stress itself is what we need to learn to balance, to manage, otherwise we will die from the consequences of stress.
There are other methods for healing or in healthcare than just what we've been taught or programmed.
What if we restored mitochondrial function?
They don't care at all what happens to your quality of life.
So we're talking about the diet style that's most favorably designed to slow the aging process, prevent disease, prevent cancer and dementia, and also reverse disease.
How do we create spaciousness for ourselves?
Every step you take, you grow, you evolve. You grow, you evolve, you expand your consciousness. You expand your consciousness, you develop more internal power, you become more available, you become more ready. Life then, God gives you more.
If you are seeking greater health, wealth, and happiness, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the #1 holistic health podcast in the world. Now, here's your host, best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and award-winning documentary filmmaker and health researcher, Nathan Crane.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm really excited today to have Dr. Michael Gregor with us. Dr. Gregor is a board-certified physician, a New York Times best-selling author, and an internationally recognized speaker on nutrition, food safety, and public health issues. He's a founding member and fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and founded nutritionfacts.org, which is a science-based nonprofit that has some of the best videos I've ever seen on reviewing scientific literature on nutrition. If you have not seen those videos, go check them out. They're also on YouTube. That's Nutrition Facts, nutritionfacts.org. Today we are talking about his book, How Not to Die, which I love the title. Dr. Gregor, welcome to the podcast.
So happy to be here.
I see you on your treadmill as usual, living by example, living a healthy life, which is always awesome.
And why aren't you on your treadmill? That's the question.
Yeah, I probably, I'm much closer to overtraining every day than I am to undertraining.
I can imagine.
Because I'm a competitive athlete, so I'll train anywhere from 4+ hours per day. So when I work, I have a standing desk, which is right over here, but nice. I do my podcast. This is really the only time I sit down during the whole day, twice a week.
All right. Sounds good. You're excused.
Yeah. But in the book, you talk about everything from how not to die from cancer to how not to die from Parkinson's to depression to even doctors' mistakes, which we know, unfortunately, in the hospital is one of the leading causes of death today, doctor errors, which is crazy to think about. And even sexual dysfunction. I mean, there's so much in the book. It's really, really rich and in depth. One commonality I see throughout your book and your work is vegetables, and more vegetables, which I couldn't agree with more. But what about people who say you need grass-fed, free-range, organic meat to be healthy?
My question to them is, need for what? Now look, I mean, it doesn't matter what you eat in your birthday, holiday, special occasions, right? It's the day-to-day stuff that really adds up. But on a day-to-day basis, we really should try to eat healthy. And there's just no cut of grass-fed steak that's going to have the nutrition of vegetables, which are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Food is kind of a zero-sum game. Everything we put in our mouth is a lost opportunity to put something even healthier in our mouth. So it's not that foods are good or bad, then they are better or worse. So when you say something like, is grass-fed beef good for you? It's like, well, compared to what? Compared to a bologna sandwich? Absolutely, right? But compared to chickpeas, I mean, you're just not, you're going to flop.
Now, what about the people who would disagree with that and say, well, the science is faulty, right? That there's not enough science that validates that all the science is primarily processed meat. There's no real hard data on, grass-fed, free-range, organic beef. What about that debate that people have?
Okay, well, I mean, if that's your position, then that's a very weak position to take, being like, there's no data supporting what I'm proposing. Well, that's a terrible way to propose something. I mean, the default is like, is prove to me that something is good for you. It's kind of guilty until proven innocent, as far as I'm concerned. There have been studies, however. There was a famous study done in Australia, comparing kind of kangaroo meat, which is kind of like their venison, to store-bought meat, and found significantly less inflammation induced by eating the kangaroo meat compared to the store-bought meat. And so certainly better, again, better or worse. Is it better than store-bought meat? Absolutely. But it still caused a bump in inflammatory markers, IL6, CRP. Whereas you eat something like a bean burrito, you actually get an anti-inflammatory effect. It's not just you get less inflammation in your body, actually has an active anti-inflammatory effect. And so, okay, so you can kind of rank it. Better would be the bean burrito. Second would be the kangaroo burrito. And then third would be the Chipotle meat burrito that they have, available for you.
You just mentioned IL6 and CRP, C-reactive protein, interleukin 6. Talk a little bit about, for people who don't know what those are, why those biomarkers are important.
So, one of the reasons I think that, it seems a little too good to be true, like the same diet that's good for your heart just so happens to be good for your brain and good for your liver and good for your kidneys. It seems like almost kind of panaceic. And you always, anytime something says, my fancy snake oil will cure all diseases, you always have to be a little, skeptical. But the reason why diet centered around whole plant foods helps in so many different organ systems and again so many different chronic diseases is because a plant-based diet is essentially synonymous with an anti-inflammatory diet, and in chronic inflammation plays a role in many of the killer diseases that are laying to waste Western societies, like heart disease and diabetes, like kidney disease and liver disease, and some of the neurological diseases. Some of the cancers have an inflammatory component. And so no wonder an anti-inflammatory diet would be able to knock so many of these down. Same thing with an artery healthy diet, a diet that helps you improve arterial function, clean out atherosclerotic plaque. Plaque just doesn't build up in your heart and cause heart attacks. It builds up in your cerebral arteries and causes strokes, builds up in penile arteries and causes erectile dysfunction, builds up in your femoral arteries and causes peripheral vascular disease. And so, every part of our body needs nutrients and oxygen, needs to get rid of waste products. And so no wonder a heart healthy diet is good for, back pain, right? Just because, you need to get nutrition into those intervertebral discs. No wonder it's good for so many things across the spectrum. And in terms of inflammation, we can actually measure the effects using the systemic markers of inflammation, like interleukin 6 and C-reactive protein, to see, wait a second, is this inflammatory or anti-inflammatory? You don't need to guess. You can actually put it to the test. And they actually came up with this dietary inflammatory index, where they just take all the studies that have ever been done, literally thousands of studies, where they just give people foods and measure the amount of inflammation in their blood. And then you can, if it has a huge anti-inflammatory effect, it gets a large negative number. If it has a huge pro-inflammatory effect, it gets a high number. And then you can add up all the foods and see if you have an overall pro-inflammatory or overall anti-inflammatory diet. And the single most pro-inflammatory component in our diet, saturated fat, trans fat. The most anti-inflammatory component of ever found is fiber, dietary fiber. Found only one place in the plant kingdom, only one place concentrated, that's whole plant foods, where saturated fats mostly found meat, dairy, and junk, and trans fats, meat, dairy, and predominantly junk, although now it's been largely removed from at least the American food supply.
Now, does that dietary inflammatory index take into account the macro levels of carbohydrates versus fats versus proteins that somebody might be taking in? Because isn't it true that in the context of, a higher fat diet, carbohydrates are going to spike insulin and cause, a negative a negative response in the body, versus on a higher carbohydrate, low fat diet, you're not going to see necessarily the same response. So I'm just curious about when they get those numbers for inflammatory foods, if they're taking those different kind of macro ratios into account or not.
So that you're absolutely right. Eating a fat-rich diet can cause insulin resistance, which is the cause of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, such that if you eat the same amount of carbohydrates, a low-fat diet versus a high-fat diet, you're going to be in a much worse situation on a high-fat diet. But we don't see the same influence on inflammatory markers. And so people eating a pristine diet, eating a particular food will have a negative reaction or positive reaction inflammatory wise, versus someone eating a lousy diet, having a high level of baseline level of inflammation or low. It's a matter of the absolute difference. And that's what they're measuring. And that's what goes into the index.
So from your work as a nutritional scientist, a medical doctor, somebody who has been researching this for decades extensively, what does a pristine diet look like?
Well, pristine diet, really the healthiest, the best available balance of evidence suggests that we should try to minimize our intake of meat, eggs, dairy, and junk, maximize the intake of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, which are beans, chickpeas, and lentils, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, mushrooms, basically real food that grows out of the ground. These are our healthiest choices. Having said that, doesn't matter what we eat on our birthdays or holidays, special occasions, right? It's the day-to-day stuff that adds up. And on a day-to-day basis, we really should try to eat healthy. And so that would be a diet centered around, not necessarily exclusively, but centered around whole plant foods.
Hey, I just want to take a quick second and thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you're enjoying it so far. As a special thank you for tuning into this episode, I want to give you my #1 Amazon best-selling book absolutely free. You can go download it right now at becomingcancerfree.com. If you want to learn evidence-based strategies for helping your body become a cancer-fighting machine for not only cancer reversal, but cancer prevention, go grab a copy of the book. Again, I'm just giving it to you for free. You can go download it at becomingcancerfree.com. All right, let's get back to the show. And what about serving amounts from the research? Because people often say, "Oh, I eat healthy," and I'm like, "Well, how many servings of vegetables are you eating a day?" They're like, "Well, I have some broccoli with my dinner," and I'm like, "Yeah, but as you talk about in your book, vegetables, and more vegetables are often one of the underlying solutions to so many of these chronic health conditions. But if people are eating 1 serving or 2 servings a day, does that cut it?"
Yeah. Well, what's remarkable is that it cuts it enough that you can actually see significant differences in health, randomizing people between 0 and 1 or 2 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Like if you would have asked me before you did that kind of study whether you'd see any difference, I'd be kind of skeptical. But it really, in fact, there's actually diminishing returns. Yes, eating 6 servings is better than 5, but the difference between 5 and 6 is smaller than the difference between 0 and 1. So it's like exercise. Yes, the more exercise, the better, but any exercise is better than 0 exercise. And so, I don't want to intimidate people off of like, oh, well, throw up their hands. I'm not going to be able to eat, 9 to 13 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, which is recommended. So I'm just going to forget about it. Any amount is better than none. But yeah, the data really does show that we should be shooting for 9 to 13 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And a serving is kind of like typically like a half cup or a tennis ball size. You have fist size. Well, you got some monster fists. So
well, I'm also
you're right.
taller.
So, yeah,
my fists match my body, so
yeah,
I think it's
probably
fine.
True, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, and knowing that most of my audience are people 50 and older dealing with chronic health conditions like cancer, for example. And so, what I often tell them is you do need to take these things more seriously, right? Someone wanting to prevent a disease and live longer, yeah, we should take this seriously. But if you have a chronic health condition, I think it's even more important that we take these recommendations, to the absolute most that we possibly can if our goal is to empower our bodies to heal. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's less effective. So secondary prevention, once you already have a disease and trying to, prevent your second heart attack or your second stroke or something, it's more difficult. You have to have more stringent. So for example, having an LDL cholesterol under 70 is enough to prevent your first heart attack. You want to prevent your second heart attack. We're really trying to push it down 30 to 50 or even lower. And that's really hard. Obviously we should try to eat as healthy as possible. And, so-called, because something like cancer, most cancers, most epithelial cancers, the typical cancers like lung cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, take literally decades to develop. Some of the blood-borne tumors, liquid tumors like leukemia can happen in a few years, but most cancers, decades to develop. So, people, we have this sense that we have no cancer, no cancer, no cancer. Then we go to the doctor to get diagnosed with cancer. Oh, yesterday I had no cancer. Today I have cancer. Oh, that sucks. No, not only yesterday you had cancer, 20 years ago, you just had no idea. So there's a blurry line between preventing cancer and treating cancer. So all of a sudden you went from yesterday preventing cancer to today treating cancer with diet. But no, all along you were both preventing and treating at the same time. The goal is to die with your tumor, not from your tumor. If you do autopsies of older men, the majority have tiny prostate cancers, but they grow so slowly that you're going to die of something else long before the prostate cancer would ever become clinical, but you'd ever even know about it. That's the goal. We need to slow down the growth of these tiny tumors such that we don't need to worry about it. So here we are thinking we're preventing cancer. In a certain sense, we are. We're preventing outright cancer we know about, clinical cancer causing side effects, causing effects on our body. But all along, we're actually treating it too. And so that's why, I don't want people to wait until their first heart attack before they start cleaning up their diet, because most people who die from heart disease, a little over 50%, die from something called sudden cardiac death, meaning they have no idea they even had heart disease. They have no diagnosed heart disease, but then they die literally within hours of their first symptoms. And so then it's too late. That's why, an ounce of prevention is way more than a pound of cure, because there is no cure for dead.
What was the percentage you said of people with heart?
It's a little over 50%.
Wow.
So it's like 55% in men, I think 51% in women. So it's not a vast majority, but it's a slight majority. And so that's why it's like, okay, well, fine. Heart disease is reversible with a healthy diet. No problem. As soon as someone tells me I got heart disease, all right, I'll get on the program. Until then, I'm going to my favorite fast food restaurant. The problem is you may not have a chance to clean up your lifestyle.
Yeah, that mindset's the flip of a coin. If it's 50%, you're flipping your life. You're flipping a coin for literally your life if you're waiting, because you said 50% of people die from sudden cardiac arrest. That's crazy. Those numbers are astonishing. I mean, in addition to what you said, we know, even according to cancer.gov, upwards of 95% of all cancers are not hereditary, meaning they are not primarily genetically driven, meaning, and even in Nature, the great journal of Nature has published that upwards of 90+% of cancers are due to diet and lifestyle. So we have this incredible power in our control to change the dietary factors and our lifestyle factors. As you're walking, we need to exercise and walk and move our bodies every day. As we're talking about diet here, eat the right kinds of foods, more vegetables, more fruits, more healthy legumes, all these kinds of things to help prevent cancer or any of these diseases in the first place. But when they come, as you said, all the cancer patients that I work with, by the time they have a cancer diagnosis, it's stage 3 or stage 4. It's metastasized. It's spread to lungs and other, lymph nodes. And now they're like, okay, now what do I do? Well, it's like, yeah, you can make all these changes now, and you should. But we should have been making these changes 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? Here's an example I want to share with you and get your feedback. A woman just emailed me today, and she says, she told me, so I hear this all the time, I've been eating really healthy, and so I don't know why my cancer came back. And I said, okay, send me a weekly meal plan of what is healthy for you, because most people think foods are healthy and maybe not so healthy. And she said, my diet most of the time is high protein meals with meat like chicken, turkey, and then some rice, and I will have a little bit of veggies and some fruits and some Greek yogurt and water and strawberries and oats, etc. So there's quite a bit in there that would be considered healthy. You know, the oats, the water, the strawberries, the fruits, the vegetables. It sounds like she's not eating very many vegetables, but eating a lot of high protein meat at every meal. So, and what you're saying, what the research shows and what your book clearly talks about is if you're eating a lot of high protein, a lot of high, maybe we can talk a bit about the science of that, why high protein animal products, you know, can lead to cancer and other chronic diseases. Aside from, you know, negative biomarkers, we talked about CRP, interleukin 6, et cetera. There's other factors that come into play, aren't there?
Yeah, so there are some carcinogens created in the cooking process. So particularly high dry heat methods of cooking. So for example, baking, broiling, grilling, barbecuing can cause inflammation. It can turn the creatine and muscles from the ruptured muscle cells at that high temperature. The creatine mixes with blood and body sugars to create these heterocyclic amines, which are known carcinogens. And so even if you don't cut down on the amount of meat you eat, but just change your cooking methods from those dry heat cooking methods to something like steaming, poaching, stewing, would cut down on those carcinogens. Similarly, we have these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are created on the grill. And so it's not all just some of the inherent properties. It's sometimes what we do in the kitchen that can affect how cancer-causing some of these products are. But in terms of kind of some of the inherent properties, so we're going to put processed meat to the side, which we know is carcinogenic, probably because of these nitrosamines and nitrosamides caused by the nitrite additives. But even just kind of fresh, unprocessed meat, unfortunately, the consumption of these high quality protein can, once we exceed kind of 0.8 grams per healthy kilogram body weight, the recommended minimum daily allowance of protein, the protein, particularly these high quality proteins, can increase the levels in our bloodstream of a growth promoting hormone called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which is cancer promoting. So you can, you do these studies where you put people on a healthy diet, put people on a plant-based diet, or even just lower their protein intake from excessive protein down to the recommended amount of protein. You can drop the IGF-1 levels, and you can drip their blood on cancer cells before and after and see the slowing of the growth of cancer, or even in some cases apoptosis, where the cancer is actually killed off by the immune system, by the immune cells found in your bloodstream. But then you can reverse that by just adding back to that petri dish the amount of IGF-1 you banished from your system by cutting down your protein intake, particularly animal protein, thereby proving that the cancer slowing, cancer stopping effect of eating healthy, even just for a few weeks, can be reversed by that IGF-1. There are other factors such as mTOR, which is boosted by these branched chain amino acids, and other reasons why eating higher protein foods not only associated with decreased longevity, but increased cancer risk.
Hey, I just want to pause a second and ask you, are you enjoying this episode so far? Are you getting good value from this content? If so, then I know you're going to absolutely love Healing Life. At healinglife.net, you get exclusive and premier access to hundreds of the top world's doctors, experts, cancer conquerors and survivors, exclusive interviews that I have done with all these experts and doctors that are not available for free online. They're only available at healinglife.net. So not only do you get access to all of those, but you actually get to speak with these doctors and experts and ask them any question you want about health and healing. And this is available exclusively to Healing Life members. You can try it out for free. Go to healinglife.net and you can start your free trial there. And whether you're interested in learning more about detox or cancer, diet and nutrition and nutritional science, about diabetes, about heart disease, autoimmune disease, anti-aging, longevity, all of these topics are covered in depth, and more are continuing to be added at Healing Life. And again, you get to talk to these doctors yourself. So I invite you to set up a free trial at healinglife.net, and I hope to see you over there. Now, let's get back to the show. So it always leads us back to more vegetables, more vegetables, more vegetables. And when we're talking about cancer, right, we know that some of the most anti-cancer vegetables are the cruciferous vegetables.
Fantastic.
Right, the sulforaphane, the plus, the antioxidants, the high nutritional content, high vitamins and minerals. I mean, we're talking about kale, dark leafy greens. You've got broccoli in there. You've got cabbage. So are you recommending people eat as much of their, vegetables raw or cooked as possible? And what about juicing them as well?
So I'm so glad you brought up cruciferous vegetables. People have the sense that, all fruits are similar, all vegetables are similar. But there's certain compounds found only in certain families of vegetables, and there's these cruciferous compounds that you mentioned that boost your liver's detoxifying ability, such that if you did happen to have that barbecue on Sunday before or after eating a hefty serving of broccoli, you can actually cut down on the amount of toxins flowing through your system because your liver is so good at detoxifying these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And in fact, it lasts a week. You could have had broccoli a week. You randomize people to eat broccoli a week before that barbecue. You can still actually see a significant drop in toxins. That's how powerful these cruciferous vegetables are. I encourage people to have at least a serving every day. In terms of raw or cooked, the sulforaphane itself, which is kind of the active component, is heat stable, but unfortunately, it's actually not found natively. It's actually produced by kind of a chemical flare reaction. There's an enzyme that creates sulforaphane from a precursor. Both the precursor and the final product are heat stable, but unfortunately, the enzyme is not. So if you destroy the enzyme, you're not going to make sulforaphane. So that's easy, no problem. All we have to do is create the sulforaphane before we cook. So if we pre-chop our cruciferous vegetables, then that chemical flare reaction happens, the sulforaphane is made, and then we can cook it all we want. So we want 45 minutes. So, you're going to eat some greens that day, get up, chop them in the morning, or at least 45 minutes before your meal. Then you can cook them, you can boil them, you can do anything you want to them, and you get the same amount of sulforaphane. Or, of course, you could eat them raw in a salad or something. And my only concern about juicing is you're throwing away a lot of nutrition. So I prefer something like blending. So like making a green smoothie or something would be better, because then you're not throwing away that fiber. Now, if you juice a vegetable and then you throw the pulp back in, okay, that's fine. I just hate to see all that fiber go to waste.
Yeah, the fiber is essential for so many functions within the body, primarily for the bacteria, microflora in our digestive system, right? I mean, that's really the food for our microflora. They need the fiber to create, they help our bodies and our immune systems process so many different functions, and they need that kind of food to thrive. Now, it is true, though, someone who's eating a high meat-based diet, they're going to have a slightly different, bacterial diversity in their gut. And so that question becomes like, how healthy is somebody's gut and immune system based on the types of foods that they're eating?
Yeah, unfortunately, the carnitine and choline found concentrated in animal foods is converted by bad bacteria in the gut to something called trimethylamine, which is oxidized by the liver, into something called TMAO, which is associated with heart failure and kidney failure and decreased decreased longevity, etc. But you take a vegan, give them an 18-ounce steak, they don't make any TMAO. Why? Because they don't have any TMAO producing bugs, meats munching bugs in their gut. Now, if you give them a steak every single day, then they start to grow these bad bugs, and then you can get that boost. And similarly, you give someone who's been slathering their guts with cheeseburgers and milkshakes their whole lives, and you give them some fiber, some high fiber food, give them some kidney beans or something, and you actually don't see as much of an anti-inflammatory effect, a beneficial effect. Why? Because they don't have a lot of good fiber eating bugs. Now, you give them those kidney beans every single day, you're going to start building up those bugs, and you're going to see the full benefits of having that microbial machinery in your gut churning out these short chain fatty acids like butyrate, which are so beneficial, absorb in your colon, circulate throughout your body, cross the blood-brain barrier, have mental health benefits, anti-inflammatory, appetite suppressing, immune boosting, and we're going to maximize those benefits by maximizing the microbial machinery by eating those prebiotics, the resistant starch and dietary fiber found concentrated in whole grains and legumes. That's going to be kind of not only the raw material that the bacteria need, but it's going to get them to be fruitful and multiply. And so there'll be lots down there ready for the next meal.
You know, I hear a lot from people, and I know with so many food allergies today, and that's a conversation for a whole other time. You know, what's really causing these food allergies and what's really causing, you know, the leaky gut and allowing these proteins to seep into the bloodstream and, you know, leading to autoimmune disease, et cetera. But I hear from people often who want to switch to a more plant-based diet, say, yes, this sounds good, I want to do it, but I can't eat beans, I can't eat legumes, I can't eat nuts and seeds, I can't eat high oxalate foods. So, you know, what do you say for people who are dealing with that? And they're like, well, I don't know what to eat. And they're struggling and they're confused. And I feel for them, you know?
Oh, no, absolutely. So, right. So if you don't have the bugs that if you have to kind of start growing those good bugs from scratch, it may take you a while to ramp up. Most people can actually, you know, add a lot of legumes to the diet without a problem, but there's a small percentage of people that do experience bloating, gastrointestinal symptoms, in which case you just have to move slow. What you do is it takes on average 2 weeks for those symptoms to disappear, and it takes 2 weeks for those. So basically, the gas formation is actually showing it's working, right? That's what fermentation is. You know, when you're making beer and you see those bubbles, that's the whole point. I mean, that's a good thing that's fermenting. But wait a second. Well, I don't want to have all that extra gas around. Well, what happens is that promotes the growth of gas-eating bugs. There's actually bugs that can thrive off of methane, thrive off of these gases created by the fiber-eating bugs, right? But it takes a few weeks, but you're not going to have those bugs if you're not eating the fiber. So it's this kind of whole ecology. And so it may take a few weeks for those gas-eating bugs and so then you get the best of both worlds. You're just churning out all those short-chain fatty acids, but you don't get the bloating or the gastrointestinal symptoms because you have those other bacteria that are also profiting kind of down the chain. You just may have to give it a few weeks.
You know, I talked to a hydrogen expert once who's, you know, and there's thousands of studies actually I found out on hydrogen and the various forms of the needs and functions of hydrogen within the body. Our body's making hydrogen every single day, and the hydrogen is coming from that gas inside our intestines. And it's actually, he's like, look, don't worry if you have to fart, if you're gassy, whatever, that's a good sign that you're healthy, because that means your body's producing a healthy amount of hydrogen, which is necessary for literally like thousands of functions within your body.
Yeah, it is a healthy sign. It's just in certain social situations, there's ways we can deal with it.
Well, Dr. Gregor, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure and a joy and a treat to get to spend some time with you. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's a blast. Looking forward to coming back. Got a new book coming out in December 2023, How Not to Age, talking about all that longevity research. Looking forward to coming back talking about it.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. And for those of you tuning in, if you have not read it yet, How Not to Die, go get a copy of it anywhere online or at your local book sellers. It's a great book, and wish you so much health and happiness. Take care.
Fantastic. See ya.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Nathan Crane Podcast. Please make sure to subscribe and share this on social media. Then head over to nathancrane.com for your free ebook.
So when we're talking about, you know, what are these underlying causes and conditions of these chronic diseases, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, they all have very similar, if not identical, causes. And that's the thing, is when we get to the root cause of these diseases, we can not only prevent these diseases from ever happening, but empower our bodies to heal from them.
In every one of our cells, we have tens and hundreds of thousands of chemical reactions that are happening every second that are cycling back and forth. And it's like sort of a yin and yang.
And, you know, for me, the soul's purpose is evolution. it doesn't care about comfort. It cares about evolution. And so I think so long as we are following our soul, then we will evolve. And I think what sometimes blocks us from living our purpose, from manifesting that next level of our expression, is we have not evolved.
There is also a time for letting go all the expectations and relax and just breathe and be grateful for what you have achieved.